Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Class 47P YouTube channel. And in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at the LNER Thompson Class A23 Pacific from Hornby. So last year, in Hornby's 2020 range, during their centenary year, they announced the LNER Thompson Class A22s and A23 Pacifics. There have been a year wait, but I'm totally fine with that because I'm just happy to just sit and wait patiently for these models to be released. The A22s came out at the beginning of the year, and the A23s have also since been released. The LNER Apple Green ones have not long been released, whereas the BR Green versions have been out for a while. Now, when these were first announced, I didn't plan to get one of these models, but since then I have taken an interest in these locomotives and I have been getting into them. And so I then decided that I would buy one for the fleet. And the one I've chosen is number 500, named Edward Thompson, after the designer himself. And the reason I've chose this one, because it's in the LNER Apple Green livery. Because the only LNER Apple Green loco I've got now in the fleet is the B12. I have got other LNER livery locos, but not many in this livery, and so that's why I've chosen this one. So it's just arrived in the post from the model centre. So I'm going to get this open and we're going to have a look at it. And I'm really looking forward to this. So here is the model, out of the box and down on the layout. So the first thing to note is that this model arrived safely. There was no damaged bits of details or bits that broke off that had to be glued back on again. So that's good. Also with the build quality, there's no parts that have been incorrectly fitted. They've all been correctly applied. So that's good. There were a couple of things though that I did notice out of the box. The first thing I noticed was the join line down the middle of the boiler, which you can see just there. When I first saw that, I was a bit concerned, to be honest, that this would have to go back and get a refund. But then, to be fair, I'm placing it on the layout. I mean, whilst you can see it if my shadow comes over it, in the certain lighting as it is now, as you can see just here, it seems to have pretty much gone. It seems to be blended into the paint, if you like, especially if you're standing some feet away from it, then you can't even see it anyway. Not to mention the fact that in my running session videos, you're never going to really see the top of the boiler that much anyway, and you'll probably never see it. So that is something that I can overlook. Some people might go, ooh, but to be honest, I don't really care. It's not a major thing. As I say, the lighting as it is now in the shed, it hides that so you can't see it. If my shadow goes over it, then you pretty much can just about see it. But to be honest, I don't think that's a big thing, really, in my opinion. And I think over time anyway, you'll probably forget it's there and you'll just ignore it. Also, with the running plate, just here, out of the box I noticed that it had got lifted up a bit. There was a bit of a bearing on it, if you like. What I did was, I just pressed my finger down on it, and that seems to have put it back into the place. So it doesn't have that bearing as it was before, because it was quite noticeable before, it's not now. But one thing that does concern me though is because if you do handle the model from here, from the frames, they do seem to lift up, if you like, bend almost as you hold it there. So the only places really that you can handle the model are here from the frames, on the running plate I should say, or just here in between the steam piping and the boiler, which means you will have to be careful when handling it. So that is just one thing really to watch out for. Some people might say you should send it back, but there's nothing worse than having to return a model, because this model out of the box, it runs smoothly in both directions, it works, and at the end of the day I've managed to sort out that running plate. So perhaps if you do get one that has got raised up or bowed, however you choose to say it, you know, just press your finger down on it and put it back into position. But when you're handling the model, you will have to be careful. But aside from those things though, there's no big issues with this model otherwise. There's no other issues that would make me return this model, because the build quality is still pretty solid otherwise. I think the build quality on these is definitely better than it was on the A22s, if I'm honest, especially given what I've read and heard about them. And also, as I've already said, this model works out the box as well, and it does have a very smooth mechanism, and it's got good weight to it as well. And you know, all the detail parts are correctly fitted, etc. There's no other quality controls I can come across, anything that I'd come out and say, right, I'm returning this model to get another one. So now we're going to make a start with the detail. So first of all, as standard, we've got sprung metal buffers. I don't have any care for the sprung buffers, but they're there. They're a standard feature. Not with every model, but with most models. You've also got a pre-fitted vacuum pipe and a dummy coupling hook. And also take note of the loco's running number, number 500, and the lining that has been printed onto the buffer beam. And the printing that's been done on that is just stunning. On the front bogie, there's no NEM pocket. Now, I'm not treating that like this is an issue, because it's not. Because I think it's refreshing to see a model that doesn't have a NEM pocket on the front bogie. So that's something I quite like. When it comes to double heading though, it can still be done, but not using the tension or couplings. What you can do is, I believe, what's called a goalpost coupling, where you can just wrap some wire. In my case, I've done this before in the past. Even if you just take some soldering wire, just wrap it around the buffer beam, and you can still do double heading. And you can still use that method for hunt couplings, believe it or not. Get some of that wire, wrap it around the buffer beam as tight as you can on the buffers. Take an old broken hunt coupling, take the magnet off, glue it on the front of the wire, and you can still double head. And it doesn't seem to cause any issues, because I've managed to do that successfully before when doing some of my double headers on the layout. And you've also got the guide irons there as well. On the running board, we have separately fitted lamp irons, and we've got the electric headlights. You've also got the bracings just here, which are correctly applied on the model. There's no gaps underneath them. On the smokebox door, we have separately fitted smokebox door darts, rivets on the smokebox door hinges. We've also got a separately fitted lamp iron and a separately fitted handrail. On the smoke deflectors, we have some very nice rivet detail. You've also got separately fitted handrails, as you can see, and we also have the nameplates, Edward Thompson, which have been crisply applied. You don't get any etched nameplates applied with the model. Some may argue for the money that we could have etched nameplates. As nice as it is to see etched nameplates, the printed ones still look nice, so I'm not really fussed by that. We've also got the chimney, which is the correct type and accurate to that of the real thing. That's been correctly fitted as well. And again, you've also got an electric headlight on the top there, just above the smokebox door. We have rivet detail on the bogie frames and the chassis frames of the locomotive. On the running plate, we have lubricator boxes, we have sand boxes, which are separately fitted. And I do like the painting on the lubricator boxes, which has been done very neatly. You've also got the reversing lever, which again is a separately fitted part, and that's made out of metal. That's not plastic, that's been painted. On the boiler we have the steam piping and separately fitted metal handrails. We've got the safety valves on the whistle, which are all separately fitted parts. Now to my eyes those safety valves look like they've been made out of turned brass, which given the finish on them would seem to suggest that. The whistle just looks to be made of plastic and painted. Would have been nice if that was a turned brass part as well, but never mind, it's there and it's still painted. It still makes a nice bit of detail. On the cab roof we have rivet detail, and we got the cab roof vents which can open and close, as you can see. We have glazing in the cab windows. We've also got separately fitted handrails, as you can see on the cab sides. The numerals, number 500, they're the correct style of numerals, and they've been crisply printed on. You've also got a builder's plate on the cab sides. Then you've got the rear pony truck under the cab, which has some very nice rivet detail on that, as well as the spring and the axle boxes and the footsteps, and there's some very nice lining printed on that. You've also got the pony truck, which does have the floating wheel, but as you can see here, it's not that very noticeable that it is a floating wheel. In fact, where it's positioned on the track here, it looks like it's almost touching the track. So I'm not really bothered that it's a floating wheel, because it's not really that noticeable that it is a floating wheel. You've also got the cab doors on both the loco and the tender. They are fixed in place so they don't open, but they still look nice, and they have been nicely painted as well. So now we come on to the cab interior detail, and I have had to take the loco off the track to show you this so you can see this better, because even if it's on a curve where my points are, you can't really get to it very well, hence having to do this. So I'm going to shine a torch in there as well so we can see the detail a bit better as well. Now, for most of the painting in the details in the cab interior, it has been done very well. It has been neatly applied. Looking at the dials though, it looks to be a bit different. Looks to be that they're not quite painted correctly, or maybe that's just me, maybe they're supposed to be like that. As you can see what I mean by when you look at them. I think that's how they're supposed to be, I'm not sure. But to me perhaps they could look like that maybe they're not being fully painted. And also, sticking with the dials, there's no printed detail on them, there's no needle or any numbers. I know you're probably not going to necessarily see the cab interior detail all that much when the loco is running, but this is something that Hornby used to do with their models, even with the Air Smooth Merchant Navies, which only came out a couple of years ago, have the needle and the dials, sorry, the needle and the numbers on the dials. So not sure why with some of Hornby's recent models have stopped doing that. And also there's no painting either on the gauges for where the glass is. It would have been nice if they'd painted inside those as well. But, you know, aside from those things, the cab interior detail is still otherwise very nicely painted and very neatly painted. Also on the faceplate of the tender we have the handbrakes, which are separately fitted, and they have been nicely painted as well. Moving on to the tender now, we have separately fitted metal handrails. There's a lot of rivets on the tender body. On the frames of the tender we have the footsteps, brake rigging, axle boxes and springs, and the tender frames have got some very nice lining crisply printed on that. In the tender we have a plastic coal load which can be removed, but it's not easy to do, especially not if you're doing this handheld. But you can remove that and put your own coal load if you wish, or just scatter it on top of the plastic load. You've got some very nice detail inside the tender as well. You've also got the water filler cap as well, which doesn't open, but doesn't really need to be honest, but it's there and it's separately fitted. On the rear of the tender we have a tension lock coupling, which will be replaced with a hump coupling. Again, you have a pre-fitted vacuum pipe and a dummy coupling hook. You have separately fitted footsteps on the rear of the tender for the crew to climb up to get up to the filler cap. There's separately fitted lamp irons and separately fitted handrails. And also we have sprung metal buffers on the tender as per the loco. So that now brings me on to the livery application, which has been very well and evenly applied. There's no blemishes in the paintwork or any marks or any imperfections, which is nice to see. The lining has been crisply applied and done very neatly on the boiler bands, around the cab, the drive wheels. I've got some very finely done lining, which has been again done very neatly. You got the lining on the tender, both on the tender sides and on the rear of the tender. You've also got some lining around the washout plugs as well. And the livery is just, there's something about the LNER Apple Green livery. It is a gorgeous livery, and it is a livery that I quite like. One interesting point now with the livery on the A23 is that if I compare it to my B12, which is also in the LNER Apple Green livery and also made by Hornby, as you can see on the B12 it's a darker shade of green, and it's a beautiful shade of green as well, if I might add. But then when we go over to the A23, as you can see here, it seems to be a different shade. And if I just bring the camera back, you can see on camera that the shade of green on the A23 does seem to be lighter than that on the B12. And yet also, if we go to the wheels on the A23, the wheels are a different colour. They are a darker shade of green. In fact, I would probably say on the wheels they're probably the same shade of green as that on the B12. Yet the LNER Apple Green itself on the model is a different shade. It seems to be lighter than that on both the B12 and on the wheels. So was it perhaps that maybe there was more than one different livery of the LNER Apple Green livery? I don't know. I'm not 100% certain. I doubt that there'd be more than one variant, but then you never know. But the livery itself, it has still been very well and neatly applied, even if it is a different shade. So it is something that I am prepared to live with. Hornby have captured the look of the prototype really well and really superbly. For anyone who wants to know how well this compares to the real thing, it looks exactly like the real locomotive as you see it in pictures and any archive footage that might exist of them. As for the real locomotives, they are controversial, as is the designer Edward Thompson, who is also controversial. And I do think, to be honest, that these locomotives do have an unfair reputation. They were built during the wartime and they needed to have easy maintenance, and I think Edward Thompson himself is, up to a point, a rather underappreciated engineer, especially given with some of the history that's written about him, which I think is unfair, really. Especially when it came to rebuilding some of the Gresley Pacifics, such as Great Northern, which at the time when that was rebuilt, the locomotive was in very tired condition and worn out and was in need of an overhaul, and that locomotive wasn't even Thompson's first choice either, and yet it's something that he has had a lot of flack for. So I have taken an interest in these locomotives. I know that they might not be to everyone's liking, and for some they might not be the best looking locomotives, but you know, I quite like them. I think they are quite interesting. They have interesting history behind them, even if they are controversial, and they are quite something else. And I think in their own right, I think they are quite handsome. And here's the other side of the loco, which does have some detail differences. You get no reversing lever or any steam piping as per the prototype. but the rest of the detail is there as it is on the other side of the loco, and again it's all been very well applied and correctly fitted. So that's it for my review for the LNER Thompson Class A23 Pacific. I've covered the model in detail and its quality, so all that's left is my conclusion. So what do I think of this model? The only criticism that I would have of this model is the running plate. I can overlook the cab interior detail, you know, the way the gauges and dials were painted. That's just a minor niggle. You know, it's nice to get a glimpse of the cab interior detail when the model is running, but in my videos you're not gonna see it anyway. I can overlook the shade of the LNER green. That's not something that I can worry about. And I know some of you are probably thinking, well, what about that join you mentioned earlier on the top of the boiler? Well, as I've mentioned, in certain lighting such as like this, you can't really see it anyway. If my shadow goes over it, for example, then that's where you can kind of see it. But, you know, you can't see it otherwise, especially in the lighting like this. Even from this angle where the camera's stood now on the tripod, you can't see it. And in my running session videos, the camera is most of the time going to be flat down on the surface, on the layout, so you'll never see it anyway. And even if I do have to get a different shot or angle where my camera is handheld, for example up there where the bridge is by the narrow gauge railway, or over there on the hill where the two hikers are, you still won't be able to see that join line there. That's something that I can overlook, and that's something, to be honest, I think I'll forget about in time. You know, you would be surprised. Like I say, the only criticism I've got is the running plate. It was bent. I've managed to fix it, as you know, as I mentioned, when I pressed down on it with my index finger. That sorted it out. In hindsight, you shouldn't really have to do that. But also, I am a bit nervous, to be honest, about handling the model from the running plate. So I'm going to be handling it here, where the boiler is, just under the steam piping. But it is still a lovely model. You know, it hasn't got any build quality issues that I would send the model back to get a replacement, because there's nothing worse than having to send a model back, because it's only going to take time for the model to get to them, then to check the models over for a replacement that doesn't have any faults, then send back to you, and then bad luck might kick in, and then you might start ending up sending several others back, as bad luck and both sides law can sometimes be. And you know, there's no issues on the model at all that I can lose sleep over, or that can bug me, or I can't live with myself for. So you know, I'm rather pleased with it. I think it's a lovely model, which it is. I have sent models back for quality control issues. In this case, I'd only send the model back if it had, for example, a nasty scratch or mark, or it had some damage that couldn't be repaired, or if the model wasn't working. And because it has none of those things, then I'm happy with it. Like I say, it is a fantastic model, I think, and it is well detailed. Like I say, the only criticism I've got is the running plate, but aside from that, it is still a lovely model. And if you are interested in these locomotives, then I would still recommend it, because at the end of the day, this is my own honest opinion on the model. There's no one off camera wiggling paper notes at me telling me to say this or that about the model. This is my own honest opinion on the model, and I think it's a lovely model. You know, I'm quite happy with it. Aside from the running plate, which has been sorted now anyway, I'm happy with it. And also it runs well as well, that's the main thing. So if you want one of these models, I do recommend you get one. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to get the A23 Pacific running around the layout with my teak coaches. I think that'll be quite a sight to see in model form. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope you've enjoyed watching it. Please do subscribe to the channel if you like what you see, and don't forget to hit the like button, and also don't forget to check out all my other videos I've got on the channel, and I'll see you again next time. But until then, take care. Ta-ra.